tell people I'm not a writer, I'm a rewriter. And I think that I learned that in college. You have to write and rewrite if you want to write well. And I was hugely influenced by, and thank goodness, the Strunk and White book, The Elements of Style, which everyone who wants to know about writing should read. I had the very good fortune to have gone to Yale University. I was an English major, and I got to work and learn from people like Thornton Wilder and Robert Penn Warren and John Hersey, who came to Yale or were there. And I still, on graduation, knew I had a great deal to learn about writing, and that the only way to do it was to write, and to write with professional people. And I went to work for Time and Life, and I learned a hell of a lot from that experience. There's nothing like being edited by good editors to learn about editing yourself. And the hardest thing of all is to edit yourself. You have to put yourself aside. You have to put this schlump of a writer who put this stuff on paper over there and bring in the brilliant editor you and edit what you've written. And one of the ways to do that is to put what you've written aside for a week or two and then come back and look at it. And of course, have somebody read it aloud to you. I loved to take the 25, 30 pages or so that I've written for a chapter and take that, put it on a clipboard, and if it's a summer afternoon, take it out under a tree and sit down and edit that with a pen. And then retype it. And then retyping what you've edited with the pen, you also are doing further editing. And then there comes a point where you realize, I think that's it, I've got it. And then you turn it over to a good editor at Simon & Schuster. I've had the very good fortune to work with 3 wonderful editors, as good as there are anywhere. First Peter Schwade, then Michael Korda, and now Bob Bender. Each different in his way, but each a practiced, accomplished professional. And editors don't get sufficient credit because they not only tell you where you can make improvements, but they tell you where you've done it well. And not necessarily their way, because each writer goes about his work, her work, in their own way, as they should. It's their books, and the editor knows that. And the good editors know when to leave well enough alone, when to tell you, don't change a word, that's just fine. Or end it here, not there. Or maybe you need to just bring that character up a little more into focus. Or maybe you put in too much about this aspect of a certain character. Never dictatorial, always advisory. Maybe this would help. Or maybe that's a direction that chapter should end on. So forth. To talk with them, just to talk, to work out your ideas, your thoughts. Work out your idea for what the book's about in the first place. I want to do this. What do you think? Well, maybe not. So forth. I've never found writing a lonely life at all. People talk about that. Yes, you have to sit down and do it on your own, by yourself. But that's only part of it. There's all the writing. There's all the research and all the people you meet through the research. There are people that you work with at your publisher. And that's vitally important and part of the pleasure, part of the joy of the work, of the life. It's a good life. When John Kennedy became president, I took his call to do something for my country to heart, and I quit my job at Time and Life and went down to Washington to see where I might be of use. And I knew no one in the Kennedy crowd, and I knew no one in the government. But I went to the U.S. Information Agency, which was then a very active and very exciting part of how our government wanted to communicate with people all over the world by informing them more about us and our country and creating public libraries elsewhere in the world for their use, for example. And I was interviewed by a man named Don Wilson, who was going to be the assistant to the new director of the USIA, who was Edward R. Murrow. And it was very exciting to be going to work for some small but important part of the government to be run by Edward R. Murrow, to say the least exciting. And Mr. Wilson, who had worked at Life magazine in Washington, but I never knew him, told me when I was being interviewed by him that he'd read my work and that I'd done and talked to people in the New York office where I'd worked, and that everything looked good. And then he said to me, "What do you know about the Arabs?" And I said, "Mr. Wilson, I don't know anything about the Arabs." And he said, "Well, you're going to learn a lot." They put me in charge of a magazine produced here, but translated into Arabic in Beirut, that was sold on the newsstands all over the Arab world. El Hayat fi America, Life in America. It was very much patterned after Life magazine. And here I was still in my 20s, thrown into this job about a part of the world I knew nothing about, working for people I knew nothing about, in the United States government, in a position of some importance to our country. And I was so over my head. But when he said, "You're going to learn a lot," that gave me a momentum. It gave me a motive, I should say. That gave me a motive. I wanted to learn a lot, and I did learn a lot. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I've been trying to learn a lot about subjects I knew very little about. So when I think of back on my own career and where the turning point came, I think it was when Don Wilson said, "You're going to learn a lot." And I found out that if they throw you in over your head, you can swim. And sometimes you learn a lot.